Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Ord. Is it ironic that the fact that we said the number one key for the Atlanta Braves having success in the second half of the season is health? And obviously that's not really anything that you can control. But it's ironic that in the first series, not only do we drop it to the Cardinals at home, which is disappointing in itself, but more importantly, we lose Max Fried to a forearm injury that occurred before he pitched in the All-Star game. He started feeling it, then he kept feeling it. They don't think it's too serious, but it's still serious enough for him to miss a couple of weeks. And honestly, with everything that's transpired this year, you can't really blame him for being as safe as possible with Max Fried. So hopefully that's just minor. Hopefully that's just a couple weeks. Maybe it's a month. Hopefully, he has enough time to get right before a potential playoff stretch run, whatever you want to call. But the bigger injury is actually Ozzie Albies, which happened in the series finale. He fractures his wrist. Out, expected to be 8 weeks. I think that might be on the higher side, but regardless, he's pretty much out for the regular season. And even if he comes back, we've seen with Austin Riley and Sean Murphy, you don't just come back and all of a sudden you're hitting 20 home runs in a couple of months stretch. It takes some time to get back. So for essentially the rest of the season, we can basically claim Ozzie Albies is not going to be Ozzie Albies, whether he returns before the end or not. And to say it's devastating is kind of an understatement. But it's just been the story of the Atlanta Braves season. I've never seen a team struck by the injury bug in football as much as this. And this is baseball, right? Like, we're used to some pitcher injuries, and you can almost expect a couple of those every season. But from a position player aspect, I mean, usually you get a little hamstring injury here or there.
It's mostly just
or
soft
a groin,
tissue stuff.
you're out for a couple of weeks, and the Braves have had that, but it's like Sean
or you
Murphy
get hit with a ball, and that's generally.
the only guys that have played every single game are Marcell Ozuna, who's obviously having a great year, and Matt Olson,
and it might not be good.
Yeah, who's obviously having a terrible year. But every single position player, Orlando Arcia, Ozzie Albies, is his second time on the IL, so he's going to have missed in total around 3 months. Austin Riley spent time on the IL. Everybody,
Michael Harris.
And Sean Murphy missed the first 2 months of the season. Michael Harris is going on 2 months with missing the season. It's one of those things that's almost unexplainable. It's terrible luck. But here's the one thing I want to say, right? And I've said this, but if I said that they're in a better position now to go and win a World Series than the 2021 team is, I firmly believe that. I still think they have enough firepower. I still think Max Fried, if he can come back healthy, assuming that is the case, you still have one of the best pitching staff, and that's always going to give you a chance. And I think you have a better lineup than you did back in 2021 before the trade deadline. Now it's time to see what kind of moves said. And listen, selling is not an option. I know we've said that, but even after these injuries, it's not an option because Ozzie Albies could still come back. He could still be back for the stretch run. Max Fried, we're expecting back.
Even if somebody else goes down, I'm talking our prominent guys.
Well,
there still won't be sellers.
Let's not say it.
Listen, I don't even really care at this point. I really don't care. But get selling out of your mind. Maybe Anthopoulos won't be as aggressive. Maybe. But that's all it's going to be. It'll be how much he buys. It won't be necessarily whether he buys or sells. There is absolutely no scenario unless a plane or a meteor crashes into Truist Park, then maybe. And even then, I think Alex Anthopoulos would be like, all right, we're going to go play in Gwinnett and we're still going to be buyers. I don't even understand. You're just punting on a season where I do agree with you that going into the trade deadline, it's not even an argument, especially with, Max Fried isn't out for the season. This pitching staff is still among the best in baseball. And past that, we're looking at guys who are MVP caliber guys who haven't been playing up to their standard. Looking at Matt Olson, Austin Riley has come on of late. We still haven't gotten Mike Harris back. Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud are finally getting in a groove with both of them playing, seemingly every other day. So even then, I totally agree with you that this team is in an infinitely better spot than it was last year. Now, the biggest thing is can Alex Anthopoulos go 4 for 4? He went 4 for 5. There's a little reliever that nobody wants to remember from that trade deadline, but 4 for 5 on buy low or buy low candidates, low risk, high reward, and going 4 for 4 parlay that, seems practically impossible to do in today's MLB.
The Athletic actually just wrote an article on the best trade deadlines of the last decade, and that was number one.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt. And it's funny because you did bring up Richard Rodriguez, or you didn't say his name, but that is the guy that was actually deemed the prize of the trade deadline when it happened, and he turned out not even to make the postseason roster, and then it went on a PED suspension and never got his option. And no one ever remembers that but that is the randomness of baseball and the trade deadline, right? Like nobody expected Jorge Soler to go on that kind of tear, or Eddie Rosario to win the NLCS MVP, Jorge Soler to win the World Series MVP, Jock Peterson to just revitalize the entire team. Like it's the randomness of the sport and the trade deadline. All you got to do, as we say, is get in the dance. And this team has so much talent. Like there are some teams that when I look at the expanded playoff, I'm like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be going for it, because I do say all it takes is get in the dance. But like a team like the Marlins last year, they had no chance of winning the World Series, right? But a team like the Diamondbacks, who is just a little bit better than the Marlins, like they had enough to get there and go to the World Series. And the Braves certainly have a better team than the Diamondbacks were a year ago. And especially after the trade deadline, I think they'll be looking. When you talk about buying and how much it's going to buy, I do think you start talking a lot more about rental players that aren't going to cost a lot more prospects like you saw in 2021. Because let's be honest, your best chance to win the World Series in this championship window, this is probably the worst chance the Braves have. It is not going to be easier without Spencer Strider or Ronald Acuna. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be done. Your odds may have been 20% with those guys, and now they're down to 10%, but you still have a 10% chance. So go out there and make the most of it. I think you're going to see Alex Anthopoulos, who's consistently been maybe the most aggressive GM in the sport, go out there and make some moves. I think it's going to be more of the rental variety. I do not expect pitching unless they really are worried about Max Fried. I think at the end of the day, we've seen the pitching of the trade deadline. We've been linked to pitchers. We've needed pitchers.
The cost doesn't outweigh the production. Like the cost of getting a ace guy is so unbelievably high that it doesn't outweigh, especially a back end of the rotation guy where you're like, is he even really going to be an asset in the playoffs? Like, and that will still be extremely expensive. You're better off just trying to hope, one of your young guys comes up and, it is better than expected in the brighter lights.
If Max Fried and Chris Sale, if Max Fried isn't healthy by the end of the season, or Chris Sale goes down, like you don't have a chance. Like there's no one that's going to be able to step in and replace those guys enough to where you really have a chance, considering all of the other injuries. So you really have to hope that the guys that have gotten you to this point are healthy when it matters most. And that's why it is kind of good that an injury like this to Max Fried's happening now, not a month from now. But let's get into the other big topic in all this, right? Because of Ozzie Albies' injuries, Nacho Alvarez is up. And Nacho Alvarez is a guy we've been talking about. This isn't exactly, it's funny because we compared it to Vaughn Grissom, right? Yeah. This is the exact scenario. Ozzie Albies went down in 2022. We had to call him up probably a little prematurely. Hopefully things work out better. But then again, we did get Chris Sale out of Vaughn Grissom, so who knows? But at the end of the day, I think Vaughn Grissom's going to be able to handle defensively the second base position without many problems. This is a guy who's been playing shortstop at the other level, and he hasn't played second base, but his athleticism, it should be very easy.
Generally speaking, you don't move from shortstop to second base and get worse.
And let's not act like Ozzie Albies was out there playing great defense. No. In fact, he was playing some of the worst defense at second base. So it should be an upgrade. And frankly, from what Ozzie Albies was giving the Atlanta Braves this season, Nacho could come up and give you that and maybe even a little more.
Below league average.
And I'm not saying he's a better player. Sample size is everything, but we're talking about a 2-month sample size here.
Well, I can immediately tell you that defensively he can give as much as Ozzie Albies, and I expect better because, like I said, AAA and major leagues, there's a big difference. But let's not, confuse just because you haven't played second base at the major or, at any level doesn't mean a guy who's played shortstop and third base both harder defensively than second base isn't possible. Moreover, he's going to give you more than Ozzie Albies on the base pass. And with the stick, Ozzie Albies on season 98 WRC plus. That's 2% below league average. Obviously, just round up. He's league average at this point or through, you're telling me Nacho Alvarez can't do that for just a short period of time. I think you're crazy. And I saw, prominent Braves beat writers talking about, moving Orlando to second base and then Nacho. You don't have to make it that difficult. It doesn't have to be that difficult. And you spoke about it. Vaughn Grissom, I know it didn't work out in the long run, but if you remember that 2022 stretch run, he came up and was more than fine. He was more than adequate, especially defensively at second base. He was fine. And offensively, he was more than fine. He was above league average. So, yes, it didn't pan out exactly how Braves fans had hoped with Vaughn Grissom. He ideally would have been the shortstop of the future. But that's not to say that Nacho Alvarez can't come up and do the same exact thing that Vaughn Grissom did in 2022 for the Braves in 2024.
I think that's kind of, there's always seems to be a shining light that sucks you in. And I think Nacho Alvarez is that with Braves fans, that considering the situation. It's almost like you don't want to watch, but I'm excited to watch because I'm excited to see him. We're going to talk a little bit more about the trade deadline and the Braves and what you can expect after the break.